Hello and welcome to the CSS Flexbox course. My name is Indro and I will be your instructor for this course. In this course, we will be learning all about the CSS Flexbox. So now let's answer the most important question. What exactly is CSS Flexbox? So the CSS Flexbox is short for Flexible Box Layout. Okay. It's a CSS layout model that simplifies creating complex layouts. It provides a flexible way to align elements and distribute the space within a container element. Okay, we will learn all about these things in this video. The Flexbox layout model is bidirectional. This means you can either arrange your elements in rows, columns, or both. Okay, so now what are the benefits of using the CSS Flexbox? Before Flexbox, it was hard to create complex layouts and responsive web pages. You needed a combination of the CSS floats and position properties. Also, you will occasionally need the margins like the margin auto properties as well, so that you can create some sort of a complex layout inside of CSS. And this required many workarounds and hacks basically. But with CSS Flexbox, you can now do the following with less difficulty and fewer lines of code. Align and center elements using properties like justify content and align items. Okay. Develop responsive layouts without writing a lots of media queries. Reorder elements without changing the HTML structure, which we will definitely see. Create same height columns without extra HTML elements or background images. Okay, so these are all of the benefits of using the CSS Flexbox. In short, by using CSS Flexbox, we can create complex layouts inside of our HTML page without writing a ton of CSS or without using some sort of hack or workarounds. CSS Flexbox makes us easy to create the complex layouts inside of HTML. Okay. All right. So what I'll do next, I will show some of the examples where the CSS Flexbox is being used. So if I go to the browser, as you can see, I will zoom in a little bit. Okay. So this is the GitHub website. If you are signed in, you will never see this page. But if you are not signed in, you will see this marketing page of GitHub. So as you can see here, this navigation bar, it is using the CSS Flexbox. And in the later part of this course, we will build our own simple navigation bar as well by using the CSS Flexbox. So to build navigation bars, the CSS Flexbox is heavily used, and this is one of the common pattern which you will find. Okay, so this navigation bar is using the CSS Flexbox. As you can see, we have two groups of content here, like these elements here on the left, and here we have the search bar, and then we have the sign in and the sign up button on the right side. Okay, and here we have the logo as well. So these are the flex elements, and the navigation bar is the flex container. Okay, if we just go a little bit more, as you can see, there are a bunch of things. We have these images as well. We have all of the content, as you can see here. On the right, we have some image, and on the left, we have some content. Most probably, it is using the CSS Flexbox as well. Okay, let's move forward. As you can see, once again, we have some image on the right, and on the left, we have some sort of content. Most probably, this is also using the CSS Flexbox. Okay, once again, we have 3 different columns, and so on. We have 2 different columns here. So these, all of the things which we have currently, it is very easy to create this sort of layout by using the CSS Flexbox. Okay. Once again, we have another website. I'll just zoom in a little bit. It is the Datadog website. Okay. Once again, as you can see, this website also uses the CSS Flexbox quite heavily. First of all, we have these two buttons. As you can see, they are side by side and they are inside of a Flex container, and these two buttons are the Flex items. Once again, we have some of the images as well, and this is using the CSS Flexbox. Like before this video, I have inspected that. Okay, and then we have this layout as well. And once again, we have some images on the right, we have some content on the left, we have some content on the right, we have some image on the left, and so on and so forth. These sort of layout, as you can see, these are some complex layouts, but by using the CSS Flexbox, we can create these sort of layouts quite easily. Okay, I hope that you have understood like what exactly is CSS Flexbox and what are the benefits of using the CSS Flexbox. Okay, before moving forward in the course, I would like to share with you some resources which will be very helpful to learn about the CSS Flexbox. First of all, we have this blog post by FreeCodeCamp by this author whose name is Benjamin Sema. Okay, I might have pronounced his name incorrectly, so sorry for that. But this blog post is quite helpful, and this is one of the best resource which I have found to learn about the CSS Flexbox. Okay, so this is called the CSS Flexbox Handbook, complete guide with practical examples. So you can search it online, and also the link of this blog post will be available inside of the description below. Next, one of the most useful websites for the web developers is Mozilla Developer Network. So this is one of the closest thing which you will find as the documentation of the CSS, HTML and JavaScript basically, right? So I will be referring to these resources quite a lot throughout this course. So first of all, we have this blog post, and then we have the Mozilla Developer Network. Okay, so let's now set up our local development environment. Okay, so in this course, we need a code editor, and my choice for the code editor is Visual Studio Code or VS Code. Okay, you can download the VS Code editor from code.visualstudio.com, and here we have the download button. If you are using Windows, you can just click on that. If you are using Mac OS, then this download button will show like download for Mac OS or something like that. Okay, and then we need a browser. My choice will be the Google Chrome browser. Okay, so here is the Google Chrome browser. You can just download the Google Chrome browser. Okay, so this is the local development environment which we have. Okay, so now let's set up the initial project to learn about the CSS Flexbox. So in my desktop, I have a folder called YouTube, and inside of that, I will create another folder called CSS Flexbox. Okay, and then I will just drag and drop inside of the VS Code icon. All right, so I have opened the folder, so CSS Flexbox. So otherwise, if you are not able to open the CSS Flexbox folder inside of VS Code, you can just go to File and then click on Open Folder. This will open the File Explorer. Okay, and then you can just select this particular folder and then click on Select Folder. All right. So here, what I'll do, I'll create the index.html file. Okay, and then I will just get rid of that. Then I will do the exclamation mark and hit enter, tab, and then I will just change the title to CSS Flexbox. Okay, and inside of the body, I will open up the h1 tag and then do something like CSS Flexbox. Okay, now after that, I will create another file called styles.css. Okay, and inside of the HTML file, what I'll do, I'll just go ahead here and do link and /styles.css. Okay, So to follow along inside of the VS Code, you want to have one extension, which is called live server. Okay. So I'll just search for that. So this is the extension. You can just install the extension. There will be an install button. I have already installed the extension. That is why I am having the uninstall button here. But you will have something like this. Okay, so you can just click on the install button and it will be installed. Then after that, you have to go to the HTML file, basically this file, and here inside of that you can see the go live button, or you can just right click and scroll down a little bit and click on this open with live server. Okay, so what will happen after that, whenever we will make some changes inside of our code, it will automatically reload the browser. Okay, I'll click on that and there we go. So I have opened this particular HTML file inside of the browser. Okay, so what I'll do, I'll just close up some of the browser tabs and go to my code editor right now, and I will add some basic styles. So I'll do margin of 0, padding of 0, box sizing, not box line, box sizing of border box, and font family to something like this one. Okay, you can use anything. All right, and for the h1 I can just do text align to center and font size to something like 4 rem, something like that. Okay, and after that what I'll do is basically I will just go ahead and move the browser here on my second desktop, and I'll close the file explorer. Okay, I'll just close that, and there we go. So now we have this particular CSS Flexbox written out here. Okay, and this is the browser window which we will be using throughout the course. Okay, so there we go. So this is the basic setup of our course. Okay, all right. Before writing some code about the CSS Flexbox, we have to learn about some terminology. Okay, and these terms we will be using throughout our course. Okay, so how Flexbox works, right? So we have some items, and these items are inside of a container. And in order to turn that container a flex container, we have to set the display property to flex or inline-flex. Okay, once we have done that, this container is now a flex container, and all of the items which we have currently right now are called the flex items. I might call them boxes or something like that, but the items which are inside of a flex container are called the flex items. And once we set the display property to flex, we will have access to many other CSS properties which we can use, such as align items, align content, justify content, and so on. Okay, so what I'll do, I'll just go to the code editor right now and I will set up some code. First of all, I'll create a div of container. Okay, inside of the div I will create another div. Okay, so dot box with the class name of box and times 6. Okay, all right, and inside of that I'll do 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, then 6. And each of the boxes will have some unique classes as well. So I'll do 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, and 6. Okay, all right. And here inside of the CSS, what I'll do, so here inside of the CSS I will write some styles. for the container and for each of the boxes. So container, and for the border I'll do 5 pixel solid and black. Okay, and I'll set a height of 1600 pixels, width of 1600 pixels. And for the time being, what I'll do, I will just comment out the height. This height, we will need it later. Okay. All right. And hit save. I think this is enough for now. And for the boxes, what I'll do, I'll just go ahead and do a height of 200 pixels, width of 200 pixels, and what I'll do, I'll set a border radius of something like 6 pixel. Okay, and for each of the boxes, as you can see, we have this 1 2 3 4 5 6. Okay, so let's go ahead, and for each of the unique boxes I will have a unique background color. Okay, so .1 background color, let's do blue violet. For 2, okay, background color, let's do brown. Okay, for 3, background color, let's do something like this one, cadet blue. For 4, background color, let's do coral. Okay, for 5, background color, let's do cornflower blue. Okay, and for 6, let's do the background color of crimson. All right, we have some unique colors currently right now. Hit save and let's see how that looks. Okay, this is way too much zoomed in. Okay, so this is that. This is 100%. Now I do not like how that is not centered and the text is quite small. Okay, so what I'll do margin. Let's do top and bottom to rem, left and right auto. Okay, and for each of the boxes, okay, I'll do a font size and do something like 4 rem. Okay, and do a text align to center. All right, now this thing looks better, right? Okay, so this is our initial setup for the code. Now, in order to turn the container a flex container, what we have to do, we have to go here. Okay, inside of this container we have to set the display to flex and hit save, and now something different will happen. Okay, this happens, so all of the elements are lined up in one line. Okay, so this happens, and also I have given the numbers, right? So what is the direction of our content? It is going from left to right, and this will be important when we will be learning about the main and the cross axis inside of the Flexbox. Okay, so this is what happens. Now what I can do after this display flex, I can set justify content to center. Hit save, and if I do that, then all of the elements are now currently centered. And why I can do that? Because I have set the display property to flex. If I just comment this thing out and hit save, now nothing happens, right? Because we have display set to flex, that is why this container is now a flex container, and that is why the CSS property justify content is available to us. And in case if you are wondering what are the other CSS properties which are available, I can show it to you. Okay, I have opened this page on MDN, which is for CSS flexible box layout. And inside of that, if I just scroll down a little bit, then we have many of the properties which are available, such as align content, align items, align self, flex, flex basis, flex direction, flex flow, flex grow, flex shrink, flex wrap, justify content. So we have just seen a glimpse of the justify content, but don't worry, we will discuss the justify content and the other properties as well in detail in this course. Okay, before moving forward, we have to learn about a little bit more terminologies. So we have to learn about the concept of main axis and cross axis inside of CSS Flexbox. So what exactly is the main axis and how it is determined? So the main axis is determined by default by the direction of the content, in which direction the content is flowing. So currently in our example, if we go here inside of the CSS Flexbox example, so our content is flowing from left to right. That is why we are having these numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. All right. So if that is the case, then this is our main axis, and the cross axis will be the perpendicular to the main axis. So if the main axis is going from left to right, then the cross axis inside of the flexbox will go from top to bottom. Now you might be thinking, okay, so the main axis is the x axis and the cross axis is the y axis. But you have to keep in mind, it is not quite simple. So because we can change the main and the cross axis, and also we can change the direction of the main and the cross axis as well. So currently the main axis is going from left to right, but by using the flex direction CSS property, we can change the direction to right to left as well. So if I just do something like this, we can change it something like this as well. Okay. So we are currently not doing that yet. We will do that in the upcoming section. Okay. So this is how the main and the cross axis is determined. Now I want to go to this blog post as well. As you can see, this blog post inside of the free code camp has described the main and the cross axis quite well. Okay, with some examples as well. But I will go to the MDN documentation as well. And inside of that, as you can see, it is saying like the main axis in Flexbox is defined by the direction set by the flex direction CSS property. Okay. And there are 4 possible values for the flex direction, which are row, row reverse, column, and column reverse. And once again, for the cross axis, it is saying the cross axis in Flexbox runs perpendicular to the main axis. Therefore, if your flex direction is either row or row reverse, then the cross axis runs down the columns. Okay. So basically it is saying like, hey, cross axis is the axis which is perpendicular to the main axis. And the main axis is determined by the direction of the content. Now, because we are using English, then our content is flowing from left to right. But if you are using some sort of a language, something like Hebrew, which is written from right to left, then the direction of the content is from right to left. Then the main axis will be from right to left. Okay, but we are not complicating the things that much. Currently, right now, we are using English, and we will be using English throughout this course, so that our calculation of the main and the cross axis remains simple. Okay. So this is the main and the cross axis. Next, we will learn about the flex direction CSS property. Okay, before learning about the flex direction CSS property, one thing which I like to discuss is the difference between the display flex and display inline flex. Okay, so what I will do here currently right now, inside of this code, inside of the HTML, I'll create an anchor tag. and this will go nowhere, and it will say click me. Okay, and I will just copy that. After the container, I will paste the anchored element. Okay, and here inside of the CSS, temporarily I will just add the anchor element and font size to 2rem. Okay, hit save and go to the browser. So currently, as you can see, this is our anchor elements, right? And one thing to point out here is that our container is a block level element. It is not an inline element like the anchor elements, right? But we can change that behavior as well. So if we go here, currently we are setting the display to display flex. But if we set the display to inline flex, okay, hit save, and now our flex container has become an inline element. Okay, but apart from that, there are no differences. So if we want to convert our container to an inline element, but we also want to use the flex properties, then we can set the display property to inline flex. Otherwise, if we want to convert our container to just a block level element, which it was by default because our container is a div, right? And div is a block level element. So in that case, we will use the normal display to flex. Okay, I hope that makes sense and you have understood the differences between the flex and the inline flex. All right, now we will learn about the flex direction CSS property. By using the flex direction CSS property, we can control the direction of the main axis. Currently in this diagram, the main axis is going from left to right, which is by default it is doing, right? But it can go from right to left, it can go from top to bottom, or it can go from bottom to top. So let's go to the documentation on MDN or also inside of this blog post as well. So the flex direction property defines the direction for displaying the flex items. It is what sets the flex container's main axis. This property can take any of these values like row, column, row reverse, or column reverse. Also, let's go to the MDN documentation and let's see what it is saying. The flex direction CSS property sets how flex items are placed in the flex container, defining the main axis and the direction, normal or reversed. Okay, and here we have all of the values which the flex direction can take. Okay, so currently our application is looking something like this. Okay, so what I'll do, I'll go to the code and I'll get rid of these anchor elements. It was just to show the differences between the flex and the inline flex. Okay, hit save, and inside of this container, I'll just get rid of the justify content. Okay, and now if I just save and go to the browser, as you can see, this happens. So this is by default using the flex. Okay, and the container is the flex container. And as you can see by this numbering, our content is going from left to right. Okay, because we are using English. All right. Now what we can do, we can set the flex direction and then we can set it to row. And this is the default value, by the way. Okay, now as you can see, nothing is changed. But now what we can do, we can set the value of the flex direction to row reverse as well. So if we do that, then as you can see, all of the elements are now stacked in the right. And please remember the direction of the content. Previously it was from left to right. Now the content is going from right to left. Why is that? Because the numbering is going from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It is going from right to left. Okay. So now what is happening? Our main axis. Okay, let me just go to the Excali draw once again. So currently our main axis is not this one. It was previously, but our main axis is currently looking something like this. Okay. I'll just do something like this. Okay, so this is our main axis. So the direction is right to left because we are using the flex direction to row reverse. Okay, now let's just go to the code. Then this flex direction can take another property, which is column. Okay, it's safe. Now everything is in one column. And what is the direction of our content? The direction of the content is from top to bottom because of this numbering basically. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. So what happened currently right now? So now our main axis, I'll just, okay, it was previously our main axis. Now what is happening? Our main axis is going from top to bottom. Okay. I hope that makes sense. And the cross axis is left to right. Okay. And if we go to the code once again, then we have another value, which is column reverse. If we set that and go to the browser, as you can see, now our content is going from bottom to top. Okay. So what is happening currently right now? Our main axis, which is here, which was previously going from top to bottom, now it will be something like this. Okay. So now our main axis is this one. I hope that makes sense. So by using the flex direction CSS property, we can control the direction of the main axis. Okay. I hope that makes sense. And yes, by using the flex direction property, we can control the direction of the content as well by changing the main axis. So what I'll do, I'll just get rid of that and I will just set the flex direction to row, which was by default. Okay, so here it is. Okay, now we will be learning the flex wrap CSS property. Okay, so as you can see, our container has a width of 1600 pixel and the height, which is commented out, which is also 1600 pixels. Okay, now we have the display set to flex and the flex direction set to row. And here what I'll do, I will increase the width of the individual boxes to 400 pixels. Okay, so we have 6 boxes, so 6 times 400 pixels, that will be equals to 2400 pixels. So because we have set the flex direction to row, that is why I can think of like, hey, all of the boxes will not fit inside of a single row, right? Because it is overflowing, right? We have this width set to 1600 pixels and all of the width combined with all of the boxes is 2400 pixels. Okay, so let's see what happens. If I just save that and go to the browser and go here, as you can see, all of the boxes are fitting inside of a single row. And what exactly is happening here? So if I just open the DevTools and just inspect one of the boxes, as you can see, the width of each of the elements, each of the boxes is 265 pixels instead of the 400 pixels which I have set inside of the code. So what exactly is happening? So what is happening here is that all of the items, like the flex items, are shrinking down in the same amount so that they can fit inside of the container in a single row. And when we will be learning about the flex shrink property, then we will see more of this shrinking property in action. But currently right now, just remember like, hey, if we are overflowing the content inside of a flex container, then all of the flex item will shrink down and it will fit inside of a single row. But we can change this behavior. Okay, so if we want like, hey, all of the elements should have the 400 pixels of width and all of the extra elements should wrap inside of the second or the third line, we can use the flex wrap to do so. So if I just go here inside of this blog post, as you can see, we have some explanation, or we can go to the MDN and see the description of the flex wrap CSS property. The flex wrap CSS property sets whether flex items are forced onto one line or can wrap onto multiple lines. If wrapping is allowed, it sets the direction that lines are stacked. Okay? And here, as you can see, the default value of the flex wrap is no wrap. Then it can wrap, or we have another value which is wrap reverse. We will see all of this in this video. So let's go to the browser and do flex wrap and set it to no wrap. Okay, and save. As you can see, nothing happens, and because this is the default behavior. But here, if we set this value to wrap and hit save, now as you can see, all of the elements have the 400 pixels of width, and the extra elements which was not fitting inside of this particular container is now wrapped onto a separate row. Okay, if we have more elements, then it will wrap into separate rows as well. So I can show it to you. If I just copy this one a bunch of times and hit save, as you can see, we have multiple rows here. So I will not do that. I will just get rid of that. Okay, so as you can see, now flex wrap is working. Okay, then we can have here, we have this wrap. So if we set the flex direction to column, we can have the wrapping inside of the column layout as well. So what I'll do, I'll just do no wrap for now for the flex wrap, and I will increase the height to 400 pixels. And now if I just save that and go here, as you can see, okay, all right. So I'll do flex direction to column, and also I will uncomment this height, because if I do not uncomment this height, what will happen? The height of the container will grow to accommodate all of the elements which are inside of the container. So I'll just have a fixed height and hit save. Now as you can see, all of the elements have the height of 265 pixels instead of 400 pixels. It is doing the same thing because we have flex wrap set to no wrap. But if I just set the flex wrap to wrap, okay, and hit save, now as you can see, we have a second column. Okay, we have a second column here. And also please remember, what is the main axis? Main axis is going from top to bottom, so 1 2 3 4 5 6, and the cross axis is going from left to right, and that is why this particular column is on the right side. Okay, so if I just set it to row once again and hit save, now as you can see, 1 2 3, and then we have 4 5 6. Okay, so the main axis is going from left to right and the cross axis is going from top to bottom. Okay, I hope that makes sense. All right, and in case if you are wondering about this space which is in between the columns and the rows, and also here as well, we will see how to control the space in the upcoming sections. Okay, all right, so this is how we can have the flex wrap. Now we can do something like row reverse as well. So let's see what happens. So if I do set the flex direction to row reverse and the flex wrap is set to wrap, then this will happen. So our main axis will go from right to left. Okay, and the cross axis is also top to bottom. So main axis is going from right to left and the cross axis is top to bottom. That is why the new row which is happening here, it is at the bottom. Okay, now we can just go here and just do something like row. Now we can do something like column as well for the flex direction. So currently the main axis is going from top to bottom and the cross axis is going from left to right. That is why the new column is at the right side. Okay, now what we can do something like column reverse as well. If we do that, then as you can see, the main axis is going from bottom to top currently right now, and the cross axis is left to right. Okay, and that is why this column is currently on the right side. So I will get back to the row layout, currently row, and we will discuss the third value which the flex wrap can take, which is wrap reverse. Okay, So if I just do something like this, as you can see, so we are having the flex direction set to row and the flex wrap set to wrap. Okay. And that is why what is happening, the new row which is forming here, because all of the elements cannot fit inside of a single row, it is on the bottom. So the new row is at the bottom. So now if we do something like wrap reverse, hit save. Now what happens is that this is the first row, 1, 2, 3, and the new row is at the top of the previous row, basically the first row. Okay. So this is how we can change the direction of the newly created row or the column. So I know this is a little bit confusing, but if we just do something like row reverse, then this will happen. So what is happening here? So we are setting the flex direction to row reverse. That is why the main axis direction is right to left. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And we have set the flex wrap to wrap reverse. That is why the newly created row, because of the flex, is now on top of the previous row or the first row. Okay, so we can do something like this, or we can do the row reverse, and then we can do something like column. So if I set the flex direction to column and the flex wrap to wrap, this will happen. So the main axis direction is from top to bottom and the cross axis direction is left to right. Okay, that is why the newly created column, which is here, it is on the right side. Okay, now if we do something like wrap reverse, then what will happen? Can you guess? So the newly created column will be at the left side, and this is the old column or the previous column, right? And if this is not confusing enough, we can do something like column reverse and hit save. And now the main axis direction is from bottom to top and the cross axis direction is from right to left. All right, so this is the flex wrap CSS property. So before moving forward, what I'll do, I'll set this flex direction to row and the flex wrap to just wrap. Okay. All right, so now let's learn about the flex flow CSS property. So let's go to the MDN documentation. So the flex flow CSS shorthand property specifies the direction of a flex container as well as its wrapping behavior. So as you can see, we have learned about the flex direction and the flex wrap CSS property, right? So it is the shorthand property for these two. As you can see, inside of the constituent properties, we have the flex direction and then we have the flex wrap. Okay, so the flex flow property can take one single value, row reverse, column, and column reverse. If we set these values, then it will indicate the flex direction property. Then it can have no wrap, or wrap reverse. So if we set these values, then it will indicate the flex wrap properties, right? And then it can have two different values as well. The first value indicates the flex direction and the second value indicates the flex wrap. Okay. All right. So what I can do here inside of the code, I can just comment this thing out and I can do something like flex flow. Okay. And now the first value will indicate the flex direction. Okay. So what I can do something like row, something like that. And if I do that and go to my code, as you can see, the flex direction is being set to row. Okay. Then I can do column. Okay. Now the flex direction is set to column. Okay. I can do something like row reverse. So it is setting the flex direction to row reverse. And then I can do column reverse as well. And this is setting the flex direction to column reverse. Okay. Then I can do something like wrap. Okay. If I do that, then this will happen. The flex wrap will set to wrap. So now, as you can see, our content is being wrapped around. inside of the flex container. Okay, and I can set something like no wrap. If I do that, then wrapping is disabled, right? And then we can do something like wrap reverse as well. If we do that, then the flex wrap is set to wrap reverse. Okay, so now this flex flow can take two different values as well. So the first value will be for the flex direction and the second value will be for the flex wrap. Okay, so what I can do, I can set the flex direction to row and flex wrap to wrap. Okay, just like these two lines. Okay, so basically we can do the same thing as these two lines are doing inside of a single line by using the flex flow CSS shorthand property. Okay, so I'll just comment this thing out and hit save. And as you can see right now, our flex direction is row and flex wrap is set to wrap. I can set the flex direction to column. Okay, so then our flex direction is set to column and flex wrap is set to wrap. We can do something like wrap reverse as well. Okay, so this is what happens. So the first value for the flex flow is indicating the flex direction, and the second value inside of the flex flow is indicating the flex wrap. Okay, so what I'll do, I'll just get rid of that and I will just do something like column reverse and wrap. So if I do that, then this will happen, which is expected, right? We have seen the main axis is going from bottom to top and the cross axis is going from left to right. Okay, so what I'll do, I'll just get rid of that and I will just set the flex direction to row and the flex wrap to wrap. Okay, all right, so this is the flex flow CSS shorthand property. All right, now we will learn about the justify content CSS property. Before doing so, what I'll do, I'll just comment out the flex flow, I'll uncomment that and only comment out the flex wrap, and we have these ones. So let me just decrease the height and the width. Okay, so that is there and that is there. So we have 200 pixels of height and the width. Hit save. And okay, all right, and for the height I'll comment that thing out as well for now. So as you can see, there we go, this is the default behavior which we want. Okay, the flex direction is set to row and we have the 6 elements with 200 pixels of width. Okay, all right, so now let's go to the justify content documentation and see. The justify content CSS property defines how the browser distributes space between and around content items along the main axis of a flex container and the inline axis of a grid or multi-col containers. We are not talking about grid right now, we are talking about Flexbox. Okay, so this is important. So the justify content CSS property basically determines how the space will be distributed among the flex items in the main axis. Okay, so as you can see, we have some of the space and by default the justify content has the value of flex start. Okay, so what I'll do, I'll go here and inside of the container I will do justify content and do flex start, and this is the default value. As you can see, nothing happens. Okay, and please remember the direction of our content. Okay, the direction is from left to right, 1 2 3 4 5 6. Okay, and all of the space is at the right side, which is leftover space, right? Now we can do something like flex end as well. If I do that, then as you can see, all of the content is now pushed in the right side and all of the leftover space is now on the left side. Okay, now you might be thinking like, hey, I can do something similar with the flex direction property as well. Okay, so if I just get rid of that, okay, and do flex direction to row reverse, then this will happen, right? All of the content is now at the right side, but there is a distinct difference because as you can see, the direction of the content is changed. So currently 1 is at the right side. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But if we do the flex direction to something like row and we will uncomment the justify content to flex end, then as you can see, the direction of our content is preserved. Okay, it is not changed, and all of the content is at the right side currently right now, and all of the leftover space is at the left side. Okay, then we have some different values as well. So we can have the space between, space around, and space evenly. We will see all of this in action. So first of all, let's see the space between. So justify content to space between. Hit save. Now, as you can see, all of these elements are now at the right edge and the left edge, and all of the leftover space is now equally distributed between all of the flex elements. Okay, so this is what space between does. So it distributes all of the space between all of the elements, and our first and the last element here is at the edge. There is no space between the border and our elements. Okay, all right. Then we can have something like space around. Okay, hit save. Now, as you can see, what is happening, all of the space which we had previously is now distributed equally around the main axis of each of the flex items. So on the left side of the first item, we have some space. On the right side of the first item, we have some space. On the left side of the second item, we have some space. On the right side of the second item, we have some space, and so on. Okay? As you can see, at the last element, we have some space on the left side, and we have some space on the right side. Then we have the justify content to space evenly. So if we do that, it is similar to space around, but there is a difference. So as you can see, there is some space between the border and this particular first element, but all of the space here now are equal. So this space between the border and the first element is equal to the space between the first element and the second element, and so on. And also there is the equal amount of space between the last element and the border as well. Okay, so this is the space evenly. Okay, then all of the things which we have seen, we can do inside of the flex direction to column as well. So if I do column, and I will just uncomment the height and do something like flex start to start with. So this is what it looks. Okay, so all of the elements are now at the top edge and it is going from top to bottom. Okay, then what we can do flex end as well. Okay, if we do that, now this will happen. All of the elements are now at the bottom, right? There is no space at the bottom and all of the free space is at the top. Why is that? Because the main axis is going from top to bottom. Okay, then we can do justify content to space around or space between first. Okay, space between, then we have no space between the border and the first element and the border and the last element, but all of the space is now distributed equally between all of the elements. Okay, then we can do space around. Okay, if we do that, then on the top of the first element we have some space, on the bottom of the first element we have some space, on the top of the second element we have some space, at the bottom of the second element we have some space, and so on. And we have some space on the top of the last element and we have some space on the bottom of the last element. Okay, then we can do something like space evenly. then you know what will happen. All of the space will become equal. So this space between the border and the first element is equal to the space between the first element and the second element, and so on. Okay. All right. So this is how we use the justify content. Now, what I'll do, I will enable the wrap and I will do the flex direction to row. Okay. And I will make these elements of something like 500 pixels of width, not the height. Okay, the height should be 200 pixel and the width should be 500 pixels. Okay, all right. If I do that, then as you can see, we have two different rows currently right now, and we have the wrapping. And for each of the rows, we are having equal amount of space between all of the elements and the border. Why is that? Because we have justify content to space evenly. We can do something like flex start, okay, and so on. All right, so one of the other values which justify content can have is the value of center. Okay, and this is very, very helpful if we want to center the elements along the main axis of the flex container. Okay, if we do that, now everything is at the center and the leftover space which we had previously is now distributed at the left and the right. Okay, so this is how justify content center works. And if we do flex direction to column, hit save, now we have the justify content set to center. That is why we have some space at the top, we have some space at the bottom, and all of the content is now centered along the main axis. Okay, so in this way we can center the elements along the main axis, and we can do that quite easily as well. If I just comment out all of these elements, and we will have only one element, so this element is now perfectly centered vertically. And if we just set the flex direction to row, then this element will be perfectly centered horizontally. Okay, all right. So now what we can do as well, we can turn on the flex wrap. So I can do something like flex wrap to wrap, and I can set the width to something like 450 pixels. Okay, hit save. Now we have the justify content set to center, and that is why it is happening, right? So all of the elements are now wrapped. The elements are wrapped inside of a separate rows, right? And each of the rows have justify content set to center. Okay, that is why there is some space at the start of the second row and there is some space at the end of the second row. All right. Okay, so we can do something like flex start as well. If we do that, this will happen. Okay, then we can do flex end. Okay, so this will happen. So everything is now at the right side. We can do space between. So each of the rows will follow the space between rule for the justify content. Okay, then we can do space around. So each of the element will have equal amount of space around them, right? So on the left and the right. Okay, and also we can do something like space evenly. Okay, if we do that, this will happen. So equal amount of space between the border and the first element and the rest of the elements, and at last here as well at the between the last element and the border, and same goes for the second row. Okay, now we can do something like flex direction to column, and we can set the height to 450 as well. Okay, all right. So if we do that, then this will happen. So we have multiple columns, and each of the columns will follow the justify content value as well. So currently it is set to space evenly. So what I can do flex start, hit save. So this will happen. Okay, then I can do flex end. So all of the elements are now at the bottom. Okay, for the first column and the second column. Then we can do space between. So for each of the columns, there is no gap between the border and the first element here. for this one and for this one as well, and all of the space for each column is now equally distributed between all of the elements. Okay, then we can do space between, we can do space evenly as well. Okay, so as you can see, even amount of space between the border and the first element, and between the first element and the second element, and so on. Okay, and then we can do space around as well. Okay, so this will happen. So equal amount of space on the top and the bottom for each of the elements here. All right, so this is basically the justify content CSS property. All right, now we will learn about the align items CSS property. So to do so, I'll do the justify content to center, and I will just get rid of this and set it to 200 pixels of height and 200 pixels of width. Hit save and go to the browser. Okay, so that is column currently right now, so set it to row and hit save. So now that is what it is. Okay, now if we go to this blog post here, it is described quite easily here. The align items property handles the alignment of flex items on the cross axis of the flex container. It can take any of these values which we will see. Okay, and here in the MDN documentation, what it is saying, so the CSS align items property sets the align self value on all direct children as a group. We will learn about the align self property in a bit. Okay, in Flexbox, it controls the alignment of the items on the cross axis. Okay, and in grid layout, it controls the alignment of the items on the block axis within their grid areas. So we are currently learning about Flexbox, so we have to worry about this particular line, like it controls the alignment of the items on the cross axis. Okay, all right, so what I'll do, I'll go here, and what I'll do, I'll just comment out the height for these elements. Okay, for the boxes. So what do you think happens? This is a little bit tricky one, because this will happen because the by default align items property value is set to stretch. So I can show it to you as well. So if I go here and do align items and set to stretch, okay, hit save. Now this is what happens. But if we set the height manually, then the Flexbox respects the height. Okay, so now it is 200 pixels. Okay, then we can have the flex start as well. If we do that, then what will happen? So what exactly is our main axis? Our main axis is going from left to right. What is our cross axis? Our cross axis is going from top to bottom. So flex start will align all of the items on the top. Okay, then we can do something like flex end as well. If we do that, then all of the elements will align to the end of the cross axis. Okay, all right, then what I'll do, I'll do something like stretch, which is the default value, and I will do the flex direction, I will set it to column. Okay, hit save, and I will just get rid of the width. So what do you think happens? So this will happen because by default the align items value is set to stretch. Okay, so this happens. So we can do something like flex start as well. If we do that, and if we just make this width available, so this will happen. So our main axis is now going from top to bottom, our cross axis from left to right. Then we can do flex end as well. Okay, if we do that, then this will happen. Okay, all right, then we have the most important thing, which is called center. Okay, we can have it to the center as well. If we do that, then all of the elements will be centered. And if we just do something like flex direction to row as well, the row will be centered. Okay. So in this way, by using the justify content and align items, we can center an element inside of a flex container. Okay. Also, I can show it to you if I just comment out all of the elements here. So now this particular element is centered perfectly horizontally and vertically. And this is regardless of the size. Because if I just make the width of something like 2000 pixels, then this element is also centered. So it is independent of the width and the height of the container. Okay. So I'll just add it to 1600 pixels. Okay. So we can do that. And also we can set the flex direction to column as well. Okay. If we do that. So, okay, there is only one element. So I'll just uncomment these things. All right. And we have the flex wrap set to wrap, right? So if I just decrease the width to, or the height basically, to something like 800 pixels, something like that, then this will happen. And if we do something like align items to flex start, then this will happen. So why it is happening? So we are having the flex wrap set to wrap. That is why our content is wrapping into another column. And we have set the align items to flex start. So what is our main axis? Our main axis is going from top to bottom. What is our cross axis? Our cross axis is going from left to right. So this particular column is at the start of the container, and this particular column is at the start at the middle, right? So this particular column is starting from the middle. So that is what is happening. Okay. Then we can do something like flex end as well. So if we do that, this will happen. So this particular column will end at the middle. So what you can think of, like our container is divided into two different parts. You can think of like that. And each of the part is now independently controlled by the justify content and the align items properties. Okay. So all right. So this is align items CSS property. All right. So now we will learn about the align content CSS property. Okay. So to do so, what I'll do, I'll set the align items to center, and we have to turn on the flex wrap in order to work with the align content CSS property. Okay. And also I'll do flex direction to row. Okay. Now I will set the height of the container to 800 pixels and the width of the container to 800 pixels as well. Okay. All right. So now this happens, right? So everything is centered right now. So now here we are having two different rows. Okay. So how we can control the space between and around these rows? We can control the space between and around these rows by using the align content CSS property. Okay. So if I go to the blog post here by FreeCodeCamp, so when you have a flex container with wrap, okay, as I have mentioned, or more than one flex line, you may need to align the lines to distribute the space as you want, right? That is when you use align content. And here on the MDN, it is saying the CSS align content property sets the distribution of the space between and around content items along the flexbox's cross axis or a grid or block level elements block axis. Now, in order to use the align content CSS property, we have to turn on the flex wrap, which we did, right? We are setting the flex wrap to wrap, and we have two different rows currently right now. So now what I can do, I can go here and do align content, and we can do something like flex start. If we do that, now what happens is all of the space which was on the top of the rows, in between of the rows, and on the bottom of the rows is now at the bottom. Okay. So then we can do something like flex end as well. If we do that, then all of the space is now at the top. Okay, then we can do something like center. If we do that, you might have guessed everything will be at the center. Now all of the elements are at the center, and all of the space which we had previously is now distributed at the top and the bottom. Okay, then we can do something like space between, and this works similarly as the justify content works, right? So as you can see, these rows which we have now, one of the rows is at the top and one of the rows is at the bottom, and all of the space is in between. Okay, then we can do space around as well. If we do that, then we have some space on the top, we have some space on the bottom of the first row, and then once again we have some space on the top and we have some space at the bottom of the second row. And then we can do something like space evenly. Okay, if we do that, then all of the space are now even. So between the border and the first row, the space, and between the first row and the second row, the space is now equal. Okay, all right. Then what we can do, we can set the flex direction to column as well. If we do that, then now we are having the main axis currently from top to bottom and the cross axis to left to right, and that is why we have two different columns. Okay, now we can do something like flex start. Okay, if we do that, then everything is at the left side. Then we can do something like flex end. If we do that, then everything is at the right side. Then we can do something like center. Now everything is at the center. All of the columns, right, is at the center. Then we can do space between, hit save. Now all of the space is now in between the two columns. Then we can do space evenly or space around. Okay, we can do space around. Then we have equal amount of space at the left side of the first column and the right side of the first column, and then once again we have equal amount of space at the left side of the second column and the right side of the second column. And then we can do something like space evenly, hit save. Now all of the space is even, so between the border and the first column, and in between the columns, and in between the second column and the border. Okay, all of the space are same. So what I'll do align content to center, so everything will be centered. And also what I'll do, I'll just reset the flex direction to row. Okay, all right, so this is the align content CSS property. All right, so now we will learn about the place content CSS shorthand property. Okay, if we go to the browser and inside of the documentation at MDN, so the place content CSS shorthand property allows you to align content along both the block and inline directions at once. That is the align content and justify content properties. Okay, in a relevant layout system such as grid or flexbox. And then if we go here, so we have the constituent properties where we have the align content and justify content. All right, then if we go to the blog post as well on FreeCodeCamp, so as you can see, if you need to use both the justify content and align content properties, you use the place content CSS shorthand property. It can take one or two values. When you give it a single value, the browser will apply the same value for the justify content and align content. And when you give two values for place content, then the first value will be for align content and the second value will be for justify content. Okay, so what I'll do, I will just show you this particular example which it is showing currently here. So we have set, in the first example, we have set the align content to flex end and justify content to flex start. And then in the second example, we are using the place content CSS property. Okay, so currently our elements are looking something like this. Okay, because we have the justify content set to center and align content set to center. So if I just get rid of that and save, now this is happening. So what I'll do, I'll go here and do something like place content, and I can just do something like center. Okay, hit save. So we are putting only one value here. So the justify content value will be center and align content value will be center. If I do that, then once again this happens and this is expected, right? Now, for example, we want to set the align content to flex start and the justify content to center. So if I do that, hit save. Now, as you can see, the justify content is set to center and the align content is set to flex start. Okay, we can do something like flex end as well. If we do that, then this happens, which is expected. So the align content value is flex end and justify content value is center. So we can do something like flex start as well. If we do that, then the align content value will be flex end and justify content value will be flex start. So if I do that, then this happens. So as you can see, whenever you want to use the justify content and align content values together, you can use the place content CSS shorthand property instead of the two CSS properties. And also if I hover over here inside of VS Code, as you can see, it is saying the syntax, the first value is for the align content and the second value is for the justify content. Okay. So whenever we want to use the align content and justify content values together, instead of writing these two properties, we can use only single one property, which is place content, and we can provide the align content and justify content values inside of the place content property. Okay, so what I'll do, I'll just get rid of that and I will just uncomment these two lines. Okay, until now we have been working with the CSS properties which are mainly linked with the flex container, right? So that is why we have been writing all of the CSS properties inside of the container class. But from now on, we will be working with the properties which are more of the flex item level, right? So these CSS properties are applicable to the flex items, okay? And we will start with the align self CSS property. So if I go here and I can just search for align self, okay, here as well, and also inside of the blog post, I'll go here and we have this align self CSS property. Okay, all right. So the align self CSS property overrides a grid of flex items align items value. So basically the align self and the align items properties work in the same way, but the align items CSS property is for all of the elements inside of a flex container, but the align self CSS property works for only one flex item. Okay, in grid it aligns the items inside the grid area. In Flexbox it aligns the items on the cross axis. Okay, so let's go to the blog post as well. So you can use the align self property to give a flex item a different alignment from the other items. Okay, so it works in the same way as align items property. The difference is that whereas align items applies to all of the flex items, the align self property is applied to only specific items. Okay, so what I'll do, I'll go here and first of all what I'll do, I'll comment out the align content here. I'll comment out the flex wrap, and for the height I'll do 1000. For the width I'll do 1600. Okay, all right. And what I'll do, I'll just comment out these two boxes here inside of the HTML and do the flex direction to row. Okay, everything is good. All right, so now this is what happens. Okay, so we have the align items set to flex start. So what we can do, we can do something like center. Okay, if I do that, then our elements are horizontally and vertically centered inside of the container. Okay, so now for example what I want to move this third box. So I want to move this third box to the top. So how I can do that? So what exactly is our main axis? The main axis is going from left to right. What is our cross axis? It is going from top to bottom. So if I want to move this third element to the top, then I have to apply the align cell property and set it to flex start. Okay. So if I just go here, so for this third element, I can do something like align self and set it to flex start. Okay, hit save. Now as you can see, it is now overwriting the align items CSS property. Okay, and our element is at the top, so we can move it at the bottom as well. So flex end, if I do that, then it is at the end. Or we can do something like center. If we do that, then it is at the center. Okay, so if I just go here, so here what I can do, I can set the align items to flex start for all of the items. So everything is now at the start, like the flex start is applied, but we have this element which has the align self to center. That is why it is at the center. Okay, so what I'll do center. Okay, all right. And then what we can do here, go here and we can set the align self value to stretch as well. So if I set the align self value to stretch, now this happens. Now it is not stretching across the whole height. So why is that? Because it has a specific height here, right? So we have, for all of the boxes, have a specific height which is 200 pixels. So what we can do here, we can just set the height to something like auto. If we do that, then now this element is stretching the full height. Okay, but I will just get rid of the height and I will just make it to center. Okay, it's safe. Now everything is at centered. Now this is for the flex direction to set to row, right? So if I just set the flex direction to column here, so flex direction to column, if I set it to that, then we have a column. So now what I want is I want to move all of the elements at the left edge of the container. So how I can do that? So what is our main axis? Our main axis is going from top to bottom. What is our cross axis? It is going from left to right. Okay, so what I can do, I can set the align items to flex start. Okay, if I do that, then all of the elements are here at the left edge, except for the third element because it has the align self property set to center. Okay, so I can do something like flex start as well. If I do that, now it is at the left edge. I can do flex end as well. Now it will be at the right edge. Okay, or I can do something like center. So it will be at the center. Or I can do something like stretch. If I do that, then nothing happens. Why nothing happens? Because we have a fixed width set here, right? So what I can do, I can set the width and set it to auto here. If I do that, now this third element is stretching across the whole width. Okay. Okay, all right. So I will just get rid of the width to auto and I will do the align self to center. Okay, if I do that, so this happens. So this is the align self CSS property. All right, now we will learn about the order CSS property. Okay, so before doing so, what I'll do, I'll just get rid of the align self here and also I will set the flex direction to row. Okay, all right. So as you can see here, all of the elements are in order, right? So let's go to the blog post here and see what it says. The order CSS property determines the order of appearance for the flex items. So what do I mean by that? As you can see, we have the example here. Okay, and if we want to change the order of appearance of these elements, we can use the order CSS property. Okay, so the value you give to this property must be a number. Okay, a flex item with a lower number will appear before one with a higher number. Okay, so if we go to the MDN order documentation here, the order CSS property sets the order to lay out an item in a flex or grid container. Items in a flex container are sorted by ascending order value and then by their source code order. This line is very important. Okay. Items not given an explicit order value are assigned the default value of 0. So the default value of order is 0. So let's go to our browser. For example, once again, I want this third element to be the first element. So the final layout should be 3, 1, 2, 4. So how I can do that? So what I can do, I can go here. For all of the boxes, I can give a order value to 0. And this is the default value. If I just save, now as you can see, nothing happens. Also, if I just go to the code, as you can see, the order it is following is the code order. Because we have this particular element first, that is why it is the first element and so on, right? So what I can do, I can go here on this particular element with the class name of 3 and do order, and I can set the order to 1. Hit save and go to the browser. So what is happening here is all of the elements have the order set to 0 and this element has the order set to 1. That is why it is on the right side, but I want the opposite thing. So what I'll do, I will add here a -1. Okay, if I save that, now we have this element as the first element and all of the other elements are here, and the order they are following is the order of the code. Okay, so as you can see, this is the order value. So items in a container are sorted by ascending order, right? So that is why it is happening. Also, what I can do, I can change this order to 1. If I just do that, then once again everything is there. But now what I can do, I can set the order value of 0, or I can just omit the order value at all. So if I do that, then this is what happens. So the third element is now our first element. Okay. Also, what I can do here, I can change the order to something like 2. If I do that, so please remember, for all of the boxes, it has the order of 1. Okay. And this particular element has the order of 2. So what will happen? So this particular element will be the last element. Okay, so this is what happens. So this third box is now our last element. Now the question is why you might want to change the order. What is the purpose? For example, what I can do here, I can just go here, just get rid of the order right now, hit save. Now go here, and to make this element, the third element, the last element, what I can do, I can just go to the source code and just cut it here and paste it down here. If I do that, then the same thing happens, right? So what is the purpose of the order property, you might be asking. So I'll just revert my changes here. Okay, so what exactly is the purpose? And here inside of the MDN, we have a good documentation or a blog post basically, like ordering the flex items. And if I just go down a little bit, as you can see, for example, we might be building some cards, something like this. Okay, so we have the date, we have the title, and we have the description. Now, to make this particular example happen, what we have to do basically, if I just go here, so we have the card, okay, and inside of that, first of all, we have the date, then we have the title, and then we have the description. Okay, so you might be thinking like, hey, this is not problematic, but the problems appears when some user is using a screen reader. So when the screen reader will go through this card, it will first tell the date and then the title and then the description. And this is not a good experience, right? For this particular card, the main important thing is title and then description and then the date. So what we can do by using the order property, we can change the order inside of the CSS, right? So here what we can do, we can have the title first, then description and then the date inside of the HTML. Okay, and then by using the order property, we can change the order of the date so that the date appears to be the first element inside of the HTML page. But in the HTML markup, we will have the title first, then description and then date. So when the screen reader will go through the card, it will first tell the title, then the description and then the date. So in that way, the order CSS property is quite useful, right? So that we can make our HTML page more accessible, right? So that is how we can use the order CSS property. Okay. So many of the times we cannot change the HTML markup directly. In that case, we can use the order CSS property. Okay. All right. So this is the order CSS property. Okay, now we will learn about the flex grow CSS property. So if we go to the documentation on MDN, the flex grow CSS property sets the flex grow factor, okay, which specifies how much of the flex container's positive free space, if any, should be assigned to the flex item's main size. When the flex container's main size is larger than the combined main sizes of its flex items, this positive free space can be distributed among the flex items, with each item's growth being their growth factor value as proportion of the sum total of all the flex items' growth factors. Okay, so what do I mean by that? So if I go here, so as you can see here, we have some free space on the left side and we have some free space on the right side. Okay, so for example, I want to distribute or I want to add these free spaces into the first item's main size. So how I can do that? I can do that by using the flex grow CSS property. So flex grow and set it to 1. This flex grow CSS property expects an unitless number. Okay, if I do that, now what happened is that all of the free space now added to the main size of this particular item. Okay, and also if I just do something like this, okay, now as you can see what is happening, it is not responsive yet because we have a fixed height and the width, right? So what I can do, I can set the width to something like 80% here. Okay, if I do that, now as you can see, this item is more responsive, right? So basically the positive free space is now decreasing when I am resizing this browser, and that is why the size of this particular element is decreasing as well. Okay, so if I just go here, all right, so this is the flex grow. So for example, now I want this particular element with the class name of 2 should grow twice as fast as the first element. So how I can do that? I can do that by adding the flex grow factor. So flex grow, and then I can do 2. Okay, so if I do that, then as you can see, now this item has twice as much free space as this first item. And many of the times there is a confusion going on like, hey, the flex grow determines the size factor or the proportion of the sizes, but no, the flex grow determines the proportion of the free space distribution. Okay, so what is happening currently right now? So because we have set the flex grow to 2, so what is happening? We are adding up all of the free space, right? And then we are dividing the free space into 3 parts. And then we are distributing the 2/3 of the free space to this element, and we are distributing the 1/3 of the free space to this element. Okay, you can think of like that. Okay, so this is the flex grow, and the flex grow CSS property determines how much faster the element should grow. For example, if I just do flex grow to 10, so this particular element will grow 10 times faster than this particular element. Okay, if I just do that, hit save, and now go here, as you can see, it has a much more free space assigned to this particular element. As you can see, this is the flex grow CSS property, which is responsible for distributing the available free space to the flex item's main size. Okay, now we will learn about the flex shrink CSS property. So if I go to the MDN documentation about the flex shrink, so the flex shrink CSS property sets the flex shrink factor of a flex item. If the size of all of the flex items is larger than the flex container, the flex items can shrink to fit according to their flex shrink value. Each flex line's negative free space is distributed between the line's flex items that have a flex shrink value greater than 0. Okay, by default, the flex shrink value is set to 1 for every element. And also, just like the flex grow, this flex shrink property expects an unitless number. Okay, so it is the shrink factor for the flex items. Okay, so to demonstrate that, we will go here, and what I'll do, I'll get rid of the flex grow here, I'll get rid of the flex grow here, and for this one we have the width set to 80%. Okay, so let's see how that looks. So this is how it looks. Okay, now for example, for all of the boxes, I will set the width to something like 1000 pixels. Okay, hit save. Now this happens. So if I just open the DevTools and see what exactly is the width. So the width, as you can see here, okay, so it is 335 pixel. It is not 1000 pixels, right? Okay, so what is happening here? So all of the flex items is shrinking down so that they can fit into a single line. Okay, so as you can see, for this element we have 335 pixels of width, then for this element 335, this element also 335, and this element has also 335 pixels of width. Okay, so if we want, like, hey, for example, this second element should shrink down twice as fast as the other elements. So how I can do that? So for example, for each of the elements, we can add a flex shrink and set it to 1. This will do nothing because it is the default value. But now for this element, what I can do something like flex shrink and set it to 2. Okay, hit save. Now as you can see, it is now shrunken down. Okay, so as you can see, what is happening here, we are saying like, hey, this second element, you should shrink down twice as fast as the other elements. Okay, so this is not a good thing basically, because we have 100 pixels of width. So let's do something like 500 pixels, and now it is now shrunken down twice as fast, and it is a little bit bigger than previously. So what is happening, this particular element has the 395 pixels of width. Okay, so width has increased. So this one also 395, this one also 395, and this one has 290 pixels of width. Okay, so as you can see, it is now shrinking down twice as fast. So we can do something like this. So we can do something like 5. Okay, so what will happen? This particular element will shrink down 5 times as fast as the other elements right now. Okay, so now as you can see, the width is 434. It is now increased, and for this element it is 172. So now if I shrink down this window, as you can see, it is shrinking down 5 times fast as the other elements. Okay, so we can do something like this. So we can set it to 2. Okay, so if I do that, then all of the other elements have the shrink factor of 2, but this element has the shrink factor of 5. Okay, so once again, the flex shrink property is not determining what exactly should be the proportion of the sizes, but it is determining how much faster the element should shrink down. Okay, so what I'll do, I'll just do flex shrink to 1, and for this element I can do flex shrink to 2. Okay, and also we can add as much as flex shrink values to all of the elements. Okay, all right, so this is the flex shrink CSS property. Okay, now we will learn about the flex basis CSS property. Okay, so let's go to the documentation on MDN. The flex basis CSS property sets the initial main size of a flex item. It sets the size of the content box unless otherwise set with box sizing. Okay, so what exactly it means? So for example, what I can do, I can go here and get rid of that, and for the width of these boxes I can do 200 pixels. Okay, if I do that, then I can go here. As you can see, everything is 200 pixels of width. But now what I can do for this first element, what I can do something like width, and I can set it to 300 pixels. Okay, hit save. Now the first element which we have is 300 pixels. Okay, I can just zoom out a little bit here. All right, so it is 300 pixels. Okay, that is good. But now let's see what happens if I just change the flex direction. So if I change the flex direction to column, hit save. Now this is expected, right? So this one has the width of 300 pixels and the other ones have the width of 200 pixels, but this one has the height of 200 pixels and the other ones has the same height. Okay, so this is good, but let's change up to row. Okay, and now what I'll do, I'll just comment out the width, and here instead of width I will do flex basis and set it to 300 pixels. Hit save. Now as you can see in the row layout, what happens is that the width of this particular element is now 300 pixels. Okay, that is good. Now if I change the flex direction to column and hit save, now as you can see, the height of this particular element is 300 pixels. Okay, so in that way flex basis is different from setting up the height or the width. So flex basis will set up the width when it is in the row layout, and it will set up the height when we are in the column layout. Okay, so in that way the flex basis is different. Now what I'll do, I'll just set up to row. Okay, and now this has the 300 pixels of width. Now you might be thinking like, hey, why we want to use the flex basis? Because we can dynamically change the height or the width depending on the flex layout, right? So that is why we can use the flex basis, and also it is a part of the flex shorthand property, which we will see up next. Okay, so we are setting the flex basis to 300 pixels, and what we can do, like normally we do something like flex grow to 1 or something like that. So we use the flex grow, flex shrink and flex basis together most of the time. So if I do that, then as you can see, what happens is that it started with the 300 pixels of width, and then it accommodates all of the free available space. Okay, so to demonstrate that, what I'll do, I'll just go here and just get rid of this background color. Okay, and also inside of this particular layout tab, and at the bottom I will turn on the Flexbox overlays. Okay, now as you can see, we are having this one. Okay, and now if I just hover over this particular element, so now as you can see on the left side we have some dotted section, right? So that particular section is the initial width which we have set with the flex basis, and then on the right side we have all of the available space which is now part of the first element because we have set the flex grow to 1. Okay, so if I just do this, okay, as you can see now, this particular part is the initial width which we have set by using the flex basis, and this particular part is now added because we have set the flex grow to 1. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So we use the flex basis CSS property so that we can set the initial width or the height depending on the flex direction, okay, to the flex item. Okay, so we have learned about the flex grow, flex shrink, and flex basis CSS properties. Now we will learn about the flex CSS shorthand property. So if we go to the documentation on MDN, so the flex CSS shorthand property sets how a flex item will grow or shrink to fit the space available in its flex container. So if we scroll down a little bit, we have all of these examples. We will get back to that in a moment. So we have the constituent properties, and as you can see, we have learned about flex grow, flex shrink, and flex basis. Okay, these three are the constituent properties of flex. So as you can see, the flex CSS property can take one unitless number, then it can take one unitless number, and it can take one length value. Then it can take two unitless numbers, and it can take one length value. And we will see all of these in action. Okay, so here we have the syntax, and here it is described quite well. So for example, for one unitless number, what it says, so one value, one unitless number, and that will set the flex grow, and the flex basis is then equal to 0%. What does that mean? This means the flex basis will not work, and the item will have the height and the width depending on the height and the width properties. Okay, so if we just use only one single number here, so it will just set the flex grow. So let's look at that. So what I'll do, I'll just uncomment this particular background color, and for the flex shrink, I'll just get rid of that. I'll just get rid of the flex basis as well, and the width as well, and I'll get rid of that as well. So if I just save that and go to the browser, now this happens, right? And this is expected. Now for this particular element, I can set flex and set it to 1. So what it will do flex grow, and it will set the flex grow to 1. Okay, hit save and go to the browser. As you can see, our first element, this element is now growing. Okay, and it is equal to this one. Okay, both of them are the same. All right, so what I'll do, I'll just go ahead and just delete the flex grow here. Okay, then it can have one value which is the height and the width. Basically it can have one length value. If we set only one length value, then it will set the flex basis. Okay, so as you can see, we can do something like 10 em, or we can do something like 100 pixel, 500 pixel, or so on. So if we set it to that, then it will set the flex basis. Then we have the two value syntax. So first value is one unitless number, and the second value is the length value. So the first value will indicate the flex grow, and the second value will indicate the flex basis. Okay, so let's see that in action. So first of all, what I can do flex grow set to 1 and flex basis set to something like 300 pixels. Hit save. Now go to the browser here and I'll open the DevTools. And if I just hover over that, as you can see, I'm not sure if that is visible enough. So what I'll do, I'll just get rid of the background color for now. So if I just hover over that, as you can see, this is the flex basis value, which is indicated by this area of the dotted lines. And this is the flex grow value, which is indicated by this area, right? So the flex basis is set to 300 pixels and flex grow is set to 1, right? Okay, so this is equivalent of doing flex basis of 300 pixels and flex grow of 1. Okay, these are equivalent. All right, then we can have 3 different values as well here, as you can see. So the first unitless value will be for the flex grow, the second unitless value will be for the flex shrink, and the third length value will be for the flex basis. And before moving forward, we have to discuss about this one as well. There is another 2 value syntax where the flex will take 2 different unitless values. The first value will indicate the flex grow and the second value will indicate the flex shrink. Okay, so we do not use it that much, but we most of the time use this particular syntax, the 3 value syntax. The first value will be for the flex grow, the second value will be for the flex shrink, and the third value will be for the flex basis. Okay, so if I just do something like this, so flex grow set to 2 and flex shrink set to 2 as well. Let's do flex grow set to 1. Okay, now if I go to the browser, as you can see, okay, we do not have the background color, so I'll just add the background color here. So we have the background color here right now. So now, as you can see, if I just shrink down this window, then our element is shrinking down twice as fast as the other elements, right? So the first element is shrinking down twice as fast, okay? Because the flex shrink is set to 2. And then the flex grow is set to 1. That is why it is taking up all of the free available space. And the flex basis is set to 300 pixels. Okay, so this is the 3 value syntax for the flex. Now, here we have all of the description of the 1 value syntax, 2 value syntax, and 3 value syntax, which is good. Then if we just go down a little bit, then we have some of the keywords as well. First of all, we have initial, then we have auto, and then we have none. Okay, so let's discuss about the initial. So it is basically equivalent of flex 0, 1, and auto. So the flex grow will be 0, flex shrink will be 1, and the flex basis will be auto. So here, by using the initial keyword, the flex item doesn't grow but can shrink. Okay, this default value expands to this one, like the flex 0, 1, and auto. The item is sized according to its width or the height properties depending on the flex direction. Okay, if there is negative available space, then the item will shrink to its minimum size to fit within the container, but will not grow to absorb any positive space available in the flex container. Okay, so let's see that in action. So what I'll do, I'll just do flex to initial, hit save. So it is equivalent of flex set to 0, 1, and auto. Okay, these 2 lines which I have written are equivalent. Okay, all right, if I do that and go here, as you can see, I'll just turn off the flex one. So as you can see, the element is not growing anymore, but it can shrink. Okay, it is shrinking. All right. Then we can set the flex to auto. If we set the flex to auto, then the flex item can grow and shrink. This value expands to 1 1 auto. Basically flex, then flex grow 1, flex shrink to 1, and flex basis to auto. The item is sized according to its width or height properties depending on the flex direction, but grows to absorb available positive space in the flex container or shrink down to its minimum size to fit in the container in case of negative space. Okay, the flex item is fully flexible. So what I can do, I can set this one to auto. So this is equivalent of flex 1 1 and auto. Okay, so these two lines are equivalent. All right, if I do that, now our flex item is growing, okay, and it will shrink down as well. So the item is totally flexible. Okay, then we can have the third value, which is none. If we set the flex value to none, the flex item neither grows nor shrinks. This value expands to flex 0 0 auto. So flex grow to 0, flex shrink to 0, and the flex basis to auto. The item is sized according to its width or height properties depending on the direction of the flex container. The flex item is fully inflexible. Okay? All right. So if I just do something like none, so it is equivalent of 0, 0, 0, and auto. So basically flex grow to 0, flex shrink to 0, and flex basis to auto. Hit save. Now go to the browser, and as you can see right now, our element is not shrinking anymore, right? The element is not shrinking. All of the other elements are shrinking because the flex shrink value is set to 0. It is not growing as well because the flex grow value is set to 0. And also for the flex basis, it has the auto value set, right? So it is not shrinking or growing at all. So this element is not flexible at all. It is totally inflexible. Okay. So by using this value, we can make one flex item inflexible. Okay. So this is how we are using the flex CSS shorthand property. So we have a little bit more of the things as well. As you can see inside of that, we have a bunch of examples which you can see and so on. So basically we have covered a lot about the Flexbox, right? And this is the flex CSS property. Okay, now we will see how we can add some gap in between our flex items. So to demonstrate that, what I'll do, I'll just go ahead and remove that. Okay, and then inside of the flex wrap, I will set the wrap to wrap, and I will set the height or the width of all of the boxes to something like 600 pixels. Okay, something like that. And inside of our HTML, I will uncomment these two elements. So if I just do that and go to our browser, as you can see, we have all of the elements here, right? Now what I'll do the align items to center as well, and align content to center as well. If I do that, then everything is centered. Okay, so we will discuss about the gap CSS property here inside of the Flexbox. So the gap CSS shorthand property sets the gap, also called gutters, between the rows and the columns. Okay, this property applies to multi-column flex and grid containers. All right, so we have two different constituent properties. We have the column gap and we have the row gap, and these are almost self-explanatory, right? So we have the row gap, which sets a gap between the rows. So the row gap CSS property sets the size of the gap or the gutter between an element's rows. Okay, so here inside of our example, we have some rows here. So what I can do, I can go inside of the container here, and I can do something like row gap and set it to 10 pixels, something like that. If I just do that and hit save, now we have some gaps between our rows, right? So we can do something like 20 pixel as well, so that the gap is a little bit bigger. Okay, so we have the gaps between our rows. Now we have the row gap and then we have the column gap as well. So the column gap CSS property sets the size of the gap, basically the gutter between an element's columns. Okay, so what I can do here, I can go to this code and do column gap and do something like 20 pixel. Hit save. Now go to our browser. As you can see, now we have some gap in between our columns as well. Okay, so what I'll do, I'll just comment out the row gap for now, so it is more distinct. Now we have two columns and we have the gap of 20 pixel in between our two columns. Okay, now we have the gap CSS shorthand property as well. As you can see, we are setting the row gap and we are setting the column gap in this manner. So instead of doing that, we can do something like gap and do something like 20 pixels. Okay, and this is basically the same as setting the row gap and the column gap, okay, to 20 pixels. So I'll just comment out that, hit save and go to the browser. As you can see, we have 20 pixels of space in between all of our elements, basically all of the rows and the columns. So we have the gap CSS property. Okay, so the gap CSS shorthand property sets the gaps, also called gutters, between the rows and the columns. Okay, so now as you can see, we have some syntax here. So we can add only one single value, which we did. So it is setting the row and the column gaps at once, but we have two different values as well. Okay, so we can do something like 20 pixel and 10 pixel. So if I just do that, so we can do 20 pixel and 10 pixels. So if I just hover over that, then as you can see, what is the syntax? So the first length value is for the row gap and the second length value is for the column gap. Okay, so the gap in between our rows will be 20 pixel and gap in between our columns will be 10 pixel. Hit save and go to our browser here. As you can see, we have 20 pixels of gap in between our rows and 10 pixel of gap in between our columns. Okay, so this is how we can use the gap. Also, there are a bunch of things, like we can use ems, we can use rems and so on. We can use different units, we can use percentages as well, and so on and so forth. Okay, so we have all of these values which we can use. So basically, whenever we want to have some gaps in between our flex items, right, we can use the row gap or the column gap, or we can use the gap CSS shorthand property. All right, so we have learned a lot about the CSS Flexbox. Now we will take our knowledge and put it into action. So first of all, what we will do, we will learn how to center the element horizontally and vertically inside of a flex container. To do so, what I'll do, I'll just get rid of all of this code here inside of the container. Okay, and we have all of these elements right inside of our HTML. Okay, so we have here, we have all of the elements. I will just comment out all of them except for the first one. Okay, if I just do that, then we have only this first element. Okay, and also what I'll do, I'll just add the width of 200 pixels. If I do that, now we have this element. Now what we want to center this element horizontally and vertically perfectly inside of the flex container which we have inside of the black bordered box. So how we can do that? So what we have to do here is we have to go inside of the container. So what we can do, we can set the display to flex. Okay, so if I do that, then nothing happens, right? So it is just a flex box. Then we have to do justify content to center and align items to center. If we do that, then as you can see, this element is now centered, okay, perfectly inside of the container. So if I just do something like this, I'll just comment out the align items right now. So the justify content is now centering the element in the main axis, right? So we have centered the element inside of the main axis, and the align items is centering the element in the cross axis, okay? So as you can see, this element is centered perfectly, and also it is not dependent on the height and the width of the container, it will be centered. So if I just shrink down the window, then as you can see, the width is changing, right? But this element is now centered perfectly, no matter what exactly is the width. And this is true for the height as well. Okay, if we change the height, for example, if we change the height from 1000 pixels to 2000 pixels, okay, now as you can see, our element still is at the center of our container, which is the flex container, right? So in that way, we can center an element inside of a container. So basically what we have to do display flex so that the container turns into a flex container. Then we have to do justify content to center so that it is centered, the element is centered inside of the container on the main axis. And then we have to do align items to center so that the item is centered along the cross axis. Okay, so I'll just do 1000 pixel. All right, and as you can see, our element currently is now centered perfectly horizontally and vertically. So in that way, we can center an element inside of a container by using the Flexbox. All right, so we have learned quite a lot about the CSS Flexbox, right? So now we will put our knowledge into action by building a simple navigation bar by using the CSS Flexbox. And this is one of the most common pattern which you will find to use the CSS Flexbox. Okay, so what I'll do, I'll just go ahead and get rid of everything basically. Okay, so I'll just get rid of everything here except for these styles. These are basic styles, right? Hit save, and I will go to inside of my HTML and I'll just get rid of all of the HTML which I have. So now I will add a nav tag. Inside of that, I'll add a div, and inside of that, I'll add a h2 and do something like logo or my logo or my brand, something like that. Okay. And then what I'll do, I'll go ahead and create an UL element, and inside of that, li, and inside of that, I'll create the anchor tag. Okay. This will not go anywhere right now. So this first element will be for the home. Then what I'll do, I'll just copy paste that a bunch of times. So in VS Code, what you can do, you can press Shift Alt and down arrow. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So we have the home, then we have the about, then we can have the pricing, then we can have something like theme or something like that, and we can have the contact. Okay, hit save and go to the browser. As you can see, there is our content. Okay, and there is nothing basically. So now what I'll do, I'll just add a class of navigation bar. Okay, hyphen bar. All right, and then I can add a class of logo here, and inside of that I will add a class of nav items. Okay, and each of the li will have a class of nav item singular. Okay, so I'll just copy that, paste it down here, 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 and here. Okay, all right, so nothing will change. So we will write some CSS to change up that. First of all, what I'll do, I'll go here and do the navigation bar. Okay, and I will turn this one as a flex container. So display to flex. Okay, if I just do that, then this will happen, right? So our elements are side by side right now. Okay, and then I can do justify content of space between, not space around, space between, and align items to center so that these elements are centered along the cross axis. Okay, so as you can see, this is what happens. Also, what I'll do, I'll add a border of 2 pixels solid and hash ccc. Okay, this is just for our reference. This is nothing to do about the flexbox and anything. And also I'll set a padding of top and bottom of something like 2 rem and not 2 rem, 1 rem, and left and right of 2 rem. Okay, if I save that, then as you can see, this happens. Also, what I'll do, I'll just do a margin of something like 1 rem. Okay, it's it. So we are having this navigation bar here. Okay, all right. And also I'll do a border radius of something like 6 pixels, something like that. Okay, now these are rounded. All right. And here what I'll do for the logo, I will just decrease the font size. So font size of 1.2 rem. Okay, something like that. So yeah, this is how that looks. So now we have the UL, which have the class of nav items. So what I'll do, I'll go here. So I'll do nav items. And now I will turn this container a flex container as well. So display to flex. And then I will do align items to center. If I do that, then as you can see, all of these are in one line. Okay, all right. So all of these are in one line. But now I want some gaps, right? So I want, more specifically, I want the column gap. So column gap of something like 20 pixels, something like that. If I do that, so now all of the elements are now separated properly. Okay. And also what I'll do something like for each of the nav item. Okay, so list style I'll set to none. Okay, so there is no list style. Okay, and also for each of the elements for the list item and for all of the anchor tags, I want no text decoration. So text decoration to none. Okay, if I do that, then all of the elements are here. Okay, and as you can see, our navigation bar has taken quite a good shape, right? So in that way, we can create a simple navigation bar by using the CSS Flexbox. So this is how we can do that. And one thing which you might have noticed is that we have this one, the navigation bar, a flex container, and inside of the flex container, we have another flex container here, the nav items, right? So we can nest the flex containers as well. Okay, I hope that was very helpful, right? So in that way, we can create a very simple navigation bar by using the CSS Flexbox. Okay, all right, so I hope you have enjoyed this course. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and let's catch up in the next one.